Well, Saudi Arabia have been announced as the official host for the 2034 World Cup. Mark, you've been writing a piece for the site about this. I have to say, having covered, I know we were all in Qatar, but having gone back to Qatar and seen the joke of a legacy a year on, now 2 years on, does this feel like it's history repeating itself, or should we give Saudi Arabia a fair chance that this is going to be a very different tournament?
I think they've got a different objective. I think Qatar was to present themselves to the world and show people who they are. I don't think the world needs to know who Saudi Arabia are. It's the biggest country, most powerful country, I guess, in the Middle East. It's well established in terms of its connections with the rest of the world, but it's got a very young pro league, as we know. It's the place where a lot of older players go to play their football, and hosting the World Cup is part of a plan by Mohammed bin Salman, the deputy crown prince, to transform Saudi Arabian society. And the World Cup is part of that project, and whether that should be in the gift of FIFA to allow a country to develop and grow, that's up for debate. But obviously, the issues that were at play in Qatar, the potential climate risks, the workers' rights issues, or the human rights issues, LGBTQ issues with the treatment of women. There's a lot of areas to address which we spoke about for years with Qatar. And you're right, you look back and has anything changed much in Qatar? I don't think so. You went back last year, James, to look at the legacy, and we've just got a lot of empty stadiums that are gathering dust. I think it does seem to be a different scenario with Saudi Arabia. I think they're trying to build a country from within, and this is part of that. I think we've all seen the images of Neom, this so-called future city with a stadium in the sky, which obviously remains a building site right now, but the idea is to build a stadium that is 350 feet above land, which takes a bit of working out. But I think, look, the reality is Saudi Arabia have been announced as host. There was no opposition. They were the only bidder for 2034. Australia and New Zealand had an early thought of bidding, but didn't progress to the bidding stage. China was always thought of as a potential bidder, but never proceeded with a bid. The only bid that actually gathered any kind of pace was the ASEAN bid, which was 10 nations in Southeast Asia, which again was never going to happen. It was Thailand, Laos, Malaysia, not really a realistic bid. So Saudi Arabia had it to themselves. They're going to be the first nation to host a 48-team World Cup. So it's a big logistical ask. And also we've got the question about when it'll be staged. And I think FIFA technical report came out 10 days ago, and it said that Saudi Arabia was the highest scoring ever technical report. But one issue that it did raise was that the climate, as we know in that part of the world, is too hot in the summer. So we're looking at a bid or a World Cup that will be held sometime between October and April. So complications, and also a further complication is that Ramadan in 2034 is due to fall between November and December, so it won't be in November and December. So yeah, lots to address and lots to work out between now and 2034.
Right. Well, let's break this down, because you've just very carefully detailed the fact that there were no other bidders. What happened to transparency in this process? Are you seriously trying to tell me that there were no other countries that were actually going to put a bid in for 2034? I think Australia were pretty much on record, certainly privately, I've been told this, that they were effectively told there's no point bidding because it's going to go to Saudi Arabia. It's pretty clear that in the same way that Gianni Infantino, the FIFA president, courted Qatar for many, many years up until the tournament. Obviously, he wasn't president when the rights were given to that tournament, but he courted them for many years. Ever since, really, in that role, he's been courting Saudi Arabia with a view to giving them this tournament. Why is there not more outrage about just how FIFA have effectively handed this on a silver platter to Saudi Arabia and not conducted a fair and transparent process?
Well, there's a couple of questions there. Obviously, another country has to lodge a bid to have the chance of beating Saudi Arabia to the tournament. And you're right, Australia.
Yeah, but if they're repeatedly told privately, there's no point you doing it, why would they bother?
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. And what I'm saying is, I think if you look at Asia as a confederation, China would be a contender, but they didn't bid. Japan, South Korea have had one. Australia and New Zealand were suggested not to. So I think beyond that, who else would be the rivals? So I guess there wasn't many potential rivals, but obviously we know that, Saudi Arabia is not really a country that has ever been anywhere close to hosting a World Cup before. So the fact that Qatar held it gave them the opportunity. But you're right. I mean, there's a confederational rotational policy for hosting World Cups, as we know. FIFA want the the world to host World Cups. Now, on that basis, Asia should have been out of the question until 2042 because they held it in 2022. So 26 is North America, 2030 was Europe, but cleverly, FIFA have brought in Africa and South America because they're going to have games in Morocco and they're going to have games in, I
It's
think
not
it's,
clever. It's outrageous
of
what
course
they're
it is,
doing.
absolutely, but that's how they've got around the system. So by all of a sudden, 2034, Asia and Oceania are on the rotational, they're favoured to get the. So you're right, a clever way of changing the system or manipulating the system has enabled 2034 to be an Asian World Cup. I think realised that Oceania was never part of the bid because that's New Zealand's the biggest country. It had to host it with Asia. So you're right. It's very hard to defend this situation because you want an open process. And I don't see it because we haven't had a rival bid. So, yes, they've got the bid without being voted for. And I think another key as well is that FIFA have announced this in a virtual press conference, on a virtual announcement. No press conference, no ability to scrutinise the decision, no opportunity to ask Gianni Infantino how this has come about. Gianni Infantino is now a guy that lives on Instagram, posting videos of himself bear hugging former footballers or presidents of associations across the globe. But in terms of being subject to questions from people like us, forget it.
The short answer to your question, James, is there are no rules. And whatever rules there were have gone out the window. And they went out the window the minute that Qatar was given that World Cup in 2022. There's no way there was a full bidding process for those two World Cups. I think they got assigned, didn't they, on the same day? Russia 2018 and Qatar in 2022.
Something else they said they'd never do again, by the way.
Right.
And now
and the day that happened, any rules that there went out the window. And I think the entire world, every single confederation boss knew it that day, that the rules as we knew it were dead. And that anything that has happened since then is just completely lawless, effectively. And that now any country with the money and the will to host a World Cup gets a World Cup, because there was no way that Qatar should have been given that World Cup. Not in a million years. And they got it.
I mean, you're right, James, about asking questions as why nobody else was bidding for this World Cup. I think I can't remember the last time a World Cup bid was held where there wasn't an obvious winner before the vote even happened. So, 2026, we know that Morocco bid, but Morocco is never going to beat this triple bid of Mexico, USA, and Canada. Russia 2018, that we know what happened in that bidding process 2018 and 22. I think there's no point going over that one again because that was one of the most controversial bidding processes ever. England wanted to bid for 2030, but was told pretty early on, forget it, you're not going to get it because nobody likes you anymore, and it's going to go to Spain and Portugal with this addition of Morocco and everybody else. So, I mean, you're probably going back to 2006 when, Germany won the rights to host it, and even then England was kind of elbowed out of the running for it. 2010 was, again, South Africa was clearly going to get it. So, while there may be a bidding process and a vote, is it really a vote? Is it really a fair bidding process? Are we surprised that 2034 has come around with only one bid? It would have been interesting if China had bid, because this all comes down to geopolitics now. It's much bigger than football. If China had bid, you're talking about a country that's much, much more powerful than Saudi Arabia. So that would have put Gianni Infantino and FIFA in a much more difficult position. But, China have kind of withdrawn from football in terms of, buying clubs and promoting the game in the last few years. So that didn't come to fruition. But it would have been an interesting scenario if you had China and Saudi Arabia both putting pressure on people for votes. I'm not sure who would have won that one. Probably would have been China.
That report, by the way, that you mentioned earlier, they released. If they were proud of that, if there was nothing to hide about that situation, they would not have released it to journalists on a Friday night at about midnight.
20
that
to midnight,
is not a good time.
20 to midnight, I think. So even if they said, "Oh, it's a global game," and it is, well, that would have been about 1:00 in the morning in Saudi Arabia. So actually, the country that's going to host the World Cup, even then, that wasn't time to suit the domestic audience there. So you're right. That a Friday night is, take out the trash day. It's very bad news over the weekend. Nobody reads it. Absolutely. They just buried it completely and hope that nobody would notice. So another element of FIFA trying to, avoid scrutiny. For me, the whole situation whereby Gianni Infantino hasn't given a press conference probably since the unforgettable one in Qatar when he said he was almost like I'm Spartacus, that one. He's the president of FIFA. It's the global game. It's the game of fans. The guy who runs football should be accountable, and he's not.
Today, I feel annoyed. very annoyed by this. I just, and I don't see how anyone can take anything they say seriously about the potential legacy of this tournament in 2034. When you look at what happened in Qatar, they talked about a legacy fund to compensate the families of the dead migrant workers. That fund has not operated properly. It never has done. And equally, even more ridiculously, they said that they would build a migrant workers centre. And effectively, this was a building where people could go who had pay disputes, contractual issues, anything to do with their employment, a physical building where they could go to get help and support. That building, A, does not exist, and B, was renamed by Infantino at his closing press conference at the Qatar World Cup as the Labour Excellence Hub. I spoke to people at the International Labour Organization, the BWI, human rights campaigners all around the world. No one had ever heard of this term before. And he just said it in a press conference to the world and went, yes, we're going to build a Labour Excellence Hub. They haven't. It doesn't exist. No one knows what it is. But we can't follow any of this up with him because he won't allow himself to be opened up to public scrutiny. It is an outrage that FIFA have been able to do this again. And for my information as well, is that a lot of the contractors who worked in Qatar are already being talked about as being the same people who are going to go over and work in Saudi Arabia. So this is going to be brought to you by the same people building the same infrastructure. Yes, the stadiums were fantastic. Yes, the metro was superb and very efficient. But at what cost? It's going to come at a real human cost. And the world should not turn its back on this. We should really be holding FIFA to account much more, I think, as we are. I think collectively we need to try and put more pressure on them and get Infantino to front up. I'm not sure exactly how we do this, but he needs to put himself, if he's got any integrity about him, he needs to front up and own these decisions and actually publicly explain not only the true legacy of Qatar and the mistakes they've made and what they're trying to do to rectify it, but how it's going to be any different and hopefully a lot better in 2034.
But this is a guy who basically handpicked Inter Miami to play in the Club World Cup, which is Infantino's, baby, because he wanted Lionel Messi at the tournament. So we've got a tournament next summer that nobody seems to want apart from Gianni Infantino and a few people in FIFA. But again, no scrutiny. They had the draw for this Club World Cup last Friday. Again, no media access, no chance to ask the questions that people want to ask. Why are you playing this tournament when so many players and clubs don't want to play it because of burnout, because of fatigue? The only way to kind of monitor Infantino is to follow his Instagram account. I really should recommend his Instagram account for people who like to see, middle-aged men hugging people and playing football with people a lot younger than them. Somebody, actually, I was speaking to somebody in the game recently who said that all Gianni Infantino wants is to be seen playing football with ex-pros. So again, that is something you'll see with a lot of pictures of Gianni Infantino playing football in five-a-side pitches and offering bear hugs and high fives. But it's not really what the president of FIFA should be doing. He should be explaining his decisions. He should be giving us more clarity, more transparency. But again, wishful thinking. 2 years since he spoke to a major press conference, so we're waiting a little while longer yet for that to happen again.